cool stuff to talk about today. You're going to like this. So today we're going to talk about this guy, Jimmy Carter. All right. So his name is Jimmy Carter. But his accent from Georgia, he's like, "Hi, I'm Jimmy Carter." And so I like to call Jimmy Carter when I talk about Jimmy Carter, because that's how Jimmy Carter says Jimmy Carter. So, this here is Jimmy Carter. He is going to run for president in 1976. He's going to run as a Democrat. He's going to run against Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford, extremely not popular after pardoning Nixon. So there's a lot of different types of people that could have beat Gerald Ford. Jimmy Carter is going to be the guy that beats him. Sorry, Jimmy Carter. So here's why. Jimmy Carter runs on the platform, "I'm not a politician." Now, he was a governor of Georgia for a time, so he does have experience in politics, but he is not your typical politician. He is a peanut farmer in Georgia, all right, and then part-time governor, I guess. He is going to run as president, and he is going to win because he is clearly not like all these other politicians. So everybody's like, we don't want a politician. We want somebody with a strong moral compass, somebody who's going to come in and do things the right way for the right reasons, and they're not going to be corrupt, and they're not going to do any of this stuff. We want a good human being to be our president. And they get that. Jimmy Carter is probably one of the greatest men that's ever been our president. And he's not a very good president. He's not. Those two things, that he is a fantastic person, he is exactly what the American people wanted. He's extremely intelligent. He has a strong moral compass, and he does the right thing for the right reasons. And he's a very ineffective president. You're like, what? Here's why. So, and here's what's interesting. Let me explain. When I say he's a good person, every single person that's ever been president points to Jimmy Carter. Republican, Democrat, everybody acknowledges he's a great person. All right, he teaches Sunday school every Sunday. He is a devout Christian man. Now, all presidents claim that they're religious. All right, everybody's like, "Oh, I go to church all the time, whatever." That ends up really not being the case. They just say that to get elected. Jimmy Carter is. He's a devoutly religious man. He's a very intelligent religious man. That a lot of knowledge. So when he comes in as the president, he's going to do things a certain way. In his mind, it's the right way. He's going to do the morally right thing to do. Here's why his administration is usually considered a failure. Nothing gets done. He refuses to compromise. There is a right, moral way of doing things. There is no compromise to morality. All right? So we're going to do things the right way, or we're not going to do it. He refuses to work with the rest of Congress because they're like, "Okay, we'll give you some of what you want. If here's what we want." He's like, "No. The right thing to do is this. This is what I've presented. This is what's best for everybody. We either do this or we don't do it at all. I'm not going to compromise on it." This is exactly what the American people wanted. Somebody who is going to do the right thing for the right reasons at the right time. Makes him a very ineffective president. Because you have to have a little bit of shadiness to you to be an effective president. You have to do some backroom deals, give away a little bit of what you want, do some stuff that are shady here, give some people some stuff they don't really deserve in order to get, the majority of what you want. Jimmy Carter ain't playing that game. He's gonna do what's right, and he'll call you out in public. There's also a major thing that he does. Not only does he tick off Congress, he ticks off the American people. So we're going to talk about the Iran hostage crisis, some other stuff we have at the Middle East while he's president. Oil's a big issue. It still is to present day, but we're still recovering from the oil crisis. The Middle East, we struggle. He goes on TV and gives America a talking to. Did we deserve it? Absolutely. Was he right? Absolutely. How does America feel about it? They don't like it. It's called his malaise speech that he will give. He's a one-term president, if you haven't already figured this out. He basically says, America, the big problem in America is you. All right? And us. He says us. He's like, we're too dependent on oil. That's a problem. We need to do things differently in society. Otherwise, we're going to keep having these problems with the Middle East that we constantly are relying on. So we have to fix the way we do things. He basically is getting onto America for kind of our culture. Americans don't respond well to being criticized. All right. So people kind of viewed, hey, we pick a president to fix our problems, not to tell us how wrong we're doing things. Everything Jimmy Carter says is right. He is correct. But it's not good for an elected official to just tell everybody how wrong they are, even if we actually are wrong. So Jimmy Carter, and so before I forget to tell you this, oh my gosh, so Jimmy Carter's still alive today. As of, what is it, here in May of 2020. Jimmy Carter is still alive, all right? Jimmy Carter, he's 90 plus years old. He is just an absolutely fantastic person. You know what he does every day? I mean, he's 90 something, all right? That he builds houses all day for Habitat for Humanity. Builds houses to give them away to people that are homeless. That's what this man still does to this day, all right? Physical labor. He got brain cancer a couple years ago. Terminal brain cancer. He beat it. They gave him 6 months to live. He got better. You know what he did the first day he was released out of the hospital? Back to building houses. Last year, he fell down some stairs at his house. Really had to get like stitches that like busted up the side of his face and all this other stuff. You know where he was the next day? Building houses. He's out there with a nail gun, all right? His side of his face is all bandaged up, 90 plus years old. He still teaches Sunday school every Sunday. Just a fantastic human being. I mean, will literally give you the shirt off his back. And he is just a great human being, not a good president. Not a good president. And I think that's a great example of showing the level of shadiness you got to be what's considered an effective president. So while Jimmy Carter, everybody acknowledges, is a wonderful human being, as far as compromising and dealing with the scum that can be politicians, he wasn't going to do it. He was going to do the right thing for the right reasons. So understanding Jimmy Carter, all right, as we go through his time in office, he is extremely famous for one thing, that today that they put him up on a pedestal like this is fantastic, and I'll tell you that story here at the end, that he doesn't get any credit for when he's in office. So I think the most important thing that happens when he's in office is this thing called the Iran hostage crisis. All right. So here's what happens. So Iran is a country in the middle in the Middle East. All right. We still have some beef with them. We've really, from this point on, we're going to have beef with Iran. So Iran has a dictator, I guess. He's a turd, guy that runs the country with an iron fist. It's called the Shah. All right. The Shah, S-H-A-H, is kind of like a term like the president, but it's more like king-ish. The Shah runs Iran, all right? The Shah is a turd. When people try to protest against him, he opens fire on them with machine guns. But gives us cheap oil. So America's friends with the Shah, all right? So the Shah and America have had a good relationship for a really long time. Probably shouldn't have, but we do. Oil is a huge part of America's thing. So Jimmy Carter has to be nice to the Shah because we're reliant on oil. This is the type of stuff that leads to what is the malaise speech of him yelling at America. Like, guys, if you don't want to deal with people like this and this whole story, we got to stop being committed to oil. Otherwise, this is the stuff we have to do. So the people in Iran do not like the Shah. Do not like him at all. All right. So they're Muslim, but the entire country is Muslim. They would like to have more of a Sharia law style government, which is a government that is run from the teachings of the Quran of the Muslim community. The head Muslim in Iran is called the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah is a smaller version, kind of like the Pope is for the Catholic Church, how they're over like the whole thing. The Ayatollah kind of exists mainly just in Iran, but so it's a very, very important religious leader, and so the Ayatollah is the term given to the religious leader. The current Ayatollah is a guy named Ayatollah Khomeini. The Shah does not allow him to exist inside Iran because the Ayatollah will challenge him for power. So he's been kicked out of Iran. He's not allowed in there. While Jimmy Carter is president, the Shah gets cancer. All right. The Shah, the leading cancer institutes in the world are in America in the 1970s. So the Shah asked America, can he come to America to get treatment? Jimmy Carter says yes. So the Shah comes to America. The moment the Shah leaves Iran, the Ayatollah comes back into Iran, and there is a revolution, and the Ayatollah takes over Iran. The Ayatollah Khomeini takes over Iran, and it is now under Sharia law, and the Shah is out of power. All right, Shah is still in America at the time getting cancer treatment. Once the Ayatollah gets power, he contacts Jimmy Carter and says, hey, I'm in power now. I want you to give us the Shah back. And Jimmy Carter's like, why do you want the Shah back? And they're like, so we can execute him. And Shah's like, and Jimmy Carter's like, no, I'm not giving you him back so you can execute him. Guy has cancer, all right? Like, after he's recovered from this, we'll see, whatever. Well, the country in Iran is pretty upset that America won't give Iran the Shah back, all right? So there's a group of Iranian college students, all right, that are going to, so they don't actually work for the Ayatollah. They're just like college students in Iran who support the Ayatollah. They invade the U.S. embassy, all right? So since we were friends with Iran, we had an embassy, which is like a building there that's technically American property filled with Americans that like interact every day with the Iranian government. The group of Iranian students invade the U.S. embassy and take a whole bunch of Americans hostage. I believe it's over 100 of them. I could be wrong with that. I know I got a video here, a clip here, and it's going to make me look dumb because I didn't look at my notes. Sorry. So they are taken hostage. They say, we will not give you these hostages back until you give us the Shah. So now they're playing hardball with Jimmy Carter, and the whole country in America looks at Jimmy Carter like, what you going to do? So the first thing he's going to do is he's like, no, we're not negotiating with terrorists. So we're going to send in our special forces and get these guys out. Now, we learn a lot from this situation. Jimmy Carter needs to send in special forces. So when he sits down with all of his military guys, like, all right, we want to send in the special forces. The Navy wants to send in the Navy SEALs. The Army wants to send in the Green Berets. Every branch wants to send in their special forces unit to go do this. And they're squabbling over who gets to go in and get the glory, I guess. But they're squabbling over who gets to do it and who's the most competent. So what Jimmy Carter decides, he's like, all right, fine, here's what we're going to do. You take the best men from each group. Take the best men from each group. We're going to put them together. We're going to send them in as one unit. So we're going to have the best of the best of the best. Go in there and get these guys out. That was our first attempt to solve this, is we send in our special forces. They are all killed on the runway immediately when they get inside Iran. What we learned from this is all of those men, none of them had trained together. They all have different strategies for doing things. Extremely ineffective to split up these special forces units. We've learned that from the Iran hostage crisis, that they all got killed, that it was extremely ineffective. A good example of how America has learned from that is in 2011 when we found Osama bin Laden, and we knew that he was in Pakistan, and we had to go in and get him in like it was a short amount of time. Barack Obama, having learned, and any president really after this had learned from what Jimmy Carter did, he doesn't say, hey, let's get together and talk about this. The logic is now, if you have to have a special forces unit go in and do something, who's the closest special forces unit? You know who happened to be the closest? SEAL Team 6. That's why they're famous. What is it, SEAL Team 5, SEAL Team 7? SEAL Team 6 was the closest one in the region. The belief is you train every special forces unit that they can do anything you ask them to do. SEAL Team 6 was the closest. That's who got sent in. They didn't talk about it. They didn't do it. Just send them in and go do it. And it went in and it was effective for what we wanted to have done. And we have learned, because of the failures of Jimmy Carter, of talking things out too much, that sometimes just trust your special forces unit. If they're not trained enough to be able to do a random mission, then they're not being trained enough as well. So it's a new mentality to special forces after this. At least how you view them, like, trust them. You're training them for these crazy missions. They got to be able to do it. So the Iran hostage crisis, it gets bad. So after that, there's like very much hostility when we try to send in our military to get them back between the Ayatollah and America. Then it gets weirder. The Shah dies. He dies of cancer in America. When the Shah dies, it makes it a really complicated issue because we're like, hey, can we have our hostages back? Now, keep in mind, they're not torturing our hostages. They bring their hostages out. I got a picture here. That'll be a video I'll show you after this. Click again. So they would bring the hostages out. This is a hostage. They'd bring them out. They'd put them in front of the camera, and they'd say, hey, how are you doing? So they're here for over a year, all right? So people want to see them constantly to make sure that they're all there. None of them are sick, that none of them are being tortured, not being starved to death. So Iran does go out of their way to make sure that the American government realizes that they're not like torturing or killing people, because if they do that, oh, it's go time. Jimmy Carter, absolutely. If they start killing hostages or anything, we're just it's war. It's go time. All right, because Iran has nothing to do with Russia at the time, so it doesn't really matter. Like, we can just go do whatever we want and not worry about World War III because it's Iran. We can go get our hostages back. But Jimmy Carter's really trying to avoid this. So it gets weird after the Shah dies. Can we just have them back? The Ayatollah doesn't want to just give them back because then it just seems like they did all for nothing. So the Ayatollah says, he's like, all right, here's what I'll do. If you are not reelected, I'll release them. If you win re-election, I'm going to keep them until you're no longer the president. Like, that was his only like power play. Jimmy Carter probably really didn't have a shot of winning in 1980 anyway. But this probably hurt his chances even more of winning in 1980 because they knew that if he doesn't win, we probably get these hostages home. So he loses the election in November, all right, of 1980. It's not until like the next Ronald Reagan will beat him, and we'll talk about that next unit. That is not until Ronald Reagan is literally being sworn in as the new president that the planes send the hostages back, and they do all make it home. They do all survive. They were there for 14 months. Is a pretty crazy situation for Jimmy Carter to have to deal with, but it was the most famous thing that was happening during Jimmy Carter's time, and it doesn't really look like he was able to do it. So he doesn't get any like wins or anything out of this because the only reason they came home is because he didn't win re-election. I got a video clip of that.
Iran, because of the great leadership of the Shah, is an island of stability in one of the more troubled areas of the world.
But that was changing fast. By late 1978, Iranians were no longer tolerating the Shah's excesses. Demonstrators were shot in the streets. More and more protesters waved pictures of the Shah's most powerful enemy. Realizing that he had lost his grip on his country, the Shah and his family fled. On February 1st, 1979, Khomeini returned to a tumultuous, emotional welcome. The country was his. In October, against the strong advice of the State Department, President Carter allowed the Shah to enter the country for cancer treatment. That was all the fuel the student radicals in Tehran needed. On November 4th, 1979, student radicals seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking over 60 Americans hostage.
60.
Ayatollah Khomeini, Iran's fundamentalist Muslim leader, refuses to release the Americans.
And according to a student spokesman, will be held as hostages until the deposed Shah is returned from the United States.
When the Shah dies in July, hopes are raised that the Iranian leaders will release the 52 Americans.
America, 1981 began with a dream come true. The hostages were back from Iran, and the whole nation took them to its heart. After 14 long months, the hostage crisis had been ended by outgoing President Jimmy Carter, but the news broke just too late for his term of office.
So it's Iran hostage crisis. And you're like, 60, not 52. I believe there's a situation where there were some older hostages or maybe like pregnant women. I do believe that there was a situation where some of them just couldn't remain there and they sent those back early on. I do think that was, I don't think eight did not die. None of the hostages died over there in that event. All right, so Jimmy Carter and Russia. All right, so it's worth talking about because as we go through in the next unit, we talk about the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russia is now talking with Jimmy Carter, and they're going to come up with SALT II, all right? The Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty, and it expands on what Nixon had done, which says, okay, one nuke for one missile. So it's going to help limit the amount of nukes each country can have. We still have plenty to wipe out the world 1,000 times over, but it is another good example of trying to work towards not all dying. This is a picture of Jimmy Carter shaking hands with Brezhnev at SALT II, the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty 2.0, which again tries to limit the further amount of nukes that you can have. SALT I said limit the amount of missiles, but didn't say anything about the amount of nukes. So people are putting multiple nukes on one missile. SALT II says, okay, same amount of missiles, but we're going to have one nuke per missile. All right. So this is the Camp David Accords. It's a thing Richard Nixon, Jimmy Carter gets like no credit for. And it's awesome at the time. So today he gets a ton of credit for this, and rightfully so. But here's what happens. So Egypt and Israel go to war. I mean, they're constantly at each other. They hate each other with a passion. Jimmy Carter is an extremely intelligent religious man. Like he's been to like seminary school and stuff. Like he knows history of religion. All right. He's got to get Israel and Egypt to talk to each other. All right. But they hate each other with a passion. So what he does, and both of them want to be friends with America. Egypt and Israel both want to be friends with America. So the president has a vacation house. It's called Camp David. It's basically like the White House, but it's kind of further in the middle of nowhere. So if you're invited to come see the president at the White House, you're showing up very official, very formal. It's all like paparazzi type stuff, like stuff there. If he invites you to come out to Camp David Accords, you show up in t-shirt and shorts, and you can just hang out and you get to be buddies. Leaders want to hang out with the president at Camp David. That means you're friends. That means like really good stuff is going to happen. So Jimmy Carter invites the leader of Israel to Camp David. He also invites the leader of Egypt to Camp David and doesn't tell them that the other one is coming. So they both show up, I imagine shorts and t-shirts, like, yeah, let's have some fun. They're both really old guys. They're like 80 years old. They show up at like the same time, and I imagine like walk into the same room, and he's like standing in the middle, and like the door shuts behind the guys, and he's like, all right, now I got you guys here. We're going to talk about some stuff, all right? None of y'all are going to leave until we come up with an agreement on how your countries can get along, all right? So he basically like kidnaps these leaders, and he like locks them in his room. What is the initial reaction by these two guys when they see the other one? They're like 80-year-old men. They get in like an actual fist fight. Like they literally, like the two men like hate each other personally, and they get in like an actual fist fight that like Jimmy Carter has to like break up the old man fight. It's absolutely baffling, and they just Jimmy Carter is baffled by how much the two men don't like each other. It's not about like Israel and Egypt, but they hate each other personally. So he finally gets them to calm down, and they're going to sit down and they're going to talk. He basically holds them hostage here for like weeks. All right. I don't know how much hostage it is, but he's able to convince them to stay. Immediately when they start arguing about what their country's differences are, they're not talking about modern stuff. They're talking about stuff that's thousands of years old from their religious texts. Because Egypt is Muslim, and Israel is Jewish, and Jimmy Carter is Christian. Now, Jimmy Carter is about the best possible person to be here. Because Jimmy Carter knows religion. He understands, like Jimmy Carter knows exactly what they're arguing about. So Jimmy Carter can hear Egypt yell at Israel and then Israel yell at Egypt, and he goes, okay, Egypt, think about this. You got to look at it from Israel's perspective. And since he's a third party, he can explain things to Egypt from Israel's perspective, and he can explain things to Israel from Egypt's perspective as a neutral party. And he makes a lot of sense to them on how they can survive together. He basically just wears them down. Finally, after 2 weeks, these two countries that have hated each other since like the beginning of time, their old men go out and they're going to sign a thing called the Camp David Accord, saying Egypt and Israel will never go to war again. All right, and so there's a picture here of that. Where am I at? Right here. So these are the two men that got in like actual fist fights at the Camp David Accords. This is Jimmy Carter. They signed this saying that they won't fight anymore and then they're going to go home. Jimmy Carter gets no credit for this. Guess why? Does anybody believe this? No, these guys just want Jimmy Carter to stop like holding them hostage. Let me go home. I'll sign whatever you want. So he gets no credit for this. It's 2020. Egypt and Israel have never gone to war again. They still both point to the Camp David Accords as their reason. I mean, it's been, it's been 40 years now? 40-some years? So looking back on it, like, that is fantastic. Like, he just talked these guys into, like, getting along. So as we get further away from Jimmy Carter's presidency, people appreciate him more because he's a good person. The Camp David Accords were successful. But the economy was really struggling. There's a recession with the oil issues. He yells at America. Like, at the time, Jimmy Carter, nobody hated Jimmy Carter because he's a good person. You can't hate him. But he wasn't like, they're like, nah, this isn't the guy we need for a president. We need somebody who can compromise really well, somebody who's a good talker, somebody who can do stuff like that. And that's what ended up being Ronald Reagan. So I have a video clip here of Jimmy Carter.
After a high-pressure summit at Jimmy Carter's Camp David retreat, Premier Reagan and Sadat promised to sign a formal peace treaty within 3 months. It was hailed as a breakthrough, a worthy follow-up to Sadat's historic trip to Jerusalem last year. It won them the Nobel Prize, but final agreement proved difficult, especially over the West Bank.
So eventually they will win the Nobel Peace Prize, but not while he's president. So all the popularity he doesn't really gain for this situation until after it's over. All right, that's as far as we're going to get today. Y'all have a good rest of your day.